Hey everybody, welcome back to Artist Talk. Our Ken Page. I had the great pleasure of interviewing Ken back in 2021. It was incredible to have that time with him. So I wanted to re-release this very special interview because last year our friend took flight. He was so inspiring and so incredibly talented. And so I'm happy to share this interview with you again. Be blessed. Have all your dreams come true?
God, no. No. The minute I think you stop dreaming or wanting to dream or having dreams that are unrealized, it's over. There are a lot of dreams I wish had come true by now. Hello. But I always try to weigh that against how blessed I've been.
Yeah, you write it, you sing, you succeed. Yeah, you're different in here for a reason. It's art and spirit. It's art and spirit. It's art and spirit. It's art and spirit. It's art and spirit.
Hello, my darling sweetheart. No, I do not see my. You know, when you're trying to get that basic gig, you don't see yourself as as a legend.
Do you still have to hustle for the basic gig?
Well, yes and no. You know, I mean, there's a certain hump I don't have to go over. But, you know, you get to the end of the day, it's still, we want you, are you available? These are the, you know, there's always some little something. Mm-hmm. But I will say more often it's a call to just do it, you know.
Yeah.
And I think it has as much to do with the fact, as terrible as this may sound, I'm at a point in my life when I'm like, look, you know, it ain't really about you wanting me, it's about me wanting to do it. Yeah. So, and, you know, 50-50, if you know what I mean, to be fair. Mm-hmm. But I remember seeing somewhere, I think it was in a documentary on Bea Richards, the great, wonderful, legendary. And she said she got to a point where when a script came in the mail, before she opened it, she would say, oh, I hope I want to do this. You know, everything that comes down the pike is not always something I want to jump at. That's the difference. Because there was a time, you know, somebody said, you know, you want to appear in this doghouse, you'd be like, how many windows are there? You know, and now it's like, no, I don't really want to do that. And thank you for asking. And I mean it sincerely. But that's the difference. You know, I think it's not quite as like it used to be, but, you know, Barbra Streisand couldn't do Gypsy, you dig? So it's like, yeah, you know.
Now, when was the last time you did something that you didn't want to do?
No time. No, I really can't, honestly, because because I moved from LA about 10 years ago and I live in St. Louis, and I work from here, knock on wood. Having removed myself from the pool, if you will, New York's another story. That's a different conversation. But I knew when I moved that I wasn't going to be on call, you know, because you get a call at 10 in the morning, they're sending sides and they want to see you over at Warner Brothers at 3. Lines memorized, dressed, and ready to go. And I thought to myself, well, you know, I'm real tired of that. And it was part of my decision to, in answer to your question, it's been a while since I've done anything I didn't really want to do. Because generally, not thank the Lord, I don't have to. So I just sort of, there are things I push myself to do that I think I don't want to do. You know what I mean? It's like, why don't you want to do it? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, it might be a little challenge, it might be a little this and that. And sometimes I say to myself, no, you should do it because you know, you're a little hesitant. So push yourself out there and do it, you know.
You didn't feel like you had to be in New York to have a Broadway career. God knows it's worked out great. But where did that come from?
I guess I would have to say probably time. Because, you know, there was a time you couldn't have pried me out of New York with a plow. You know, I was like, I didn't want to go nowhere. I didn't want to go on a vacation. I was like, I was scared I'd miss something. And you would have missed something. Even just the fun of living. I mean, it wasn't just about career. New York, you know, stuff's going on all the time. And I remember landing when I go away and you could feel the excitement. You'd get into LaGuardia and you were like, let me get it. Come on. Let me back in there. See what everybody's been doing. So I guess I would say Los Angeles, I was there in and out twice, 20 years. And I think that sort of changed my feeling about it in that way, because it's a different animal. You know that. Of course, LA is a very different animal. And you do a lot of sitting, you do a lot of waiting, you do a lot of hoping, you do a lot of praying, and you can win and win big in a second. Or you can just be on the ring hanging there for years, And I was fortunate enough to work, but I got to the point where I wanted to work more like I had in New York. I didn't want to sit there, The weather was lovely, the pool was not all that, but I didn't want to just sit. I wanted to be doing something and creating and so forth.
Right.
And I think I did the best of that I could do under the circumstances. I started directing and doing some theater things as an actor, here and there. But it just allowed me the opportunity to say, you have to make choices. And I think that's the hardest thing for all of us as actors, especially if you're younger. Of course, I was in the process of getting older all the time. But you do think to yourself, after a point, it's your life. It's not just a career. And if you're not living your life to your satisfaction, you're wasting your life. Career, you look around, 20 years have flown by. I think it was Paul Newman who said, you go to LA, and no offense against LA, just a euphemism, but you put your chair down at the beach and you get up to go home, it's 20 years later. Mm-hmm. And it can really, really be like that, Yeah. And I said to myself, I didn't want to get stuck. So I started cultivating the mentality of make choices. Don't just wait for things to happen to you. Mm-hmm. Don't wait for them to just call you. Make things happen as much as you can, and that's kind of how I started thinking about it. And I would say that was probably in the middle 90s, early 90s. Yeah.
Okay. I worked with you in the late 90s in 1997.
Yes, Pajama Game, right?
We did Pajama Game, yes, but then we did The Wizard of Oz.
Oh my God, yes! I was thinking today, I said, I know we did something else together and I could not bring it. Get along. Yes, The Wizard of Oz. See, that was my, I had moved to LA and come back. Mm-hmm. That was my second go-round in New York. We did The Wizard of Oz. Okay. And we did Pajama Game. I was still, I think that was the early part of having moved back. And then later on, Wizard of Oz came up. Yes, because you understudied Eartha and everything. I remember that.
That's right.
Yes, and you went on. I remember.
I did.
Yes.
I think the thing that made such a huge impression, though, on me, besides you were even then a legend, but what made this huge impression on me was that you were this person, award-winning actor. You had done some of our gems of shows, and you were in this production of The Wizard of Oz with Eartha Kitt and Mickey Rooney.
Yes.
And you could not have been more kind. I mean, so kind, so giving, so just regular.
Oh, thank you.
And we've seen the other. We've seen
up close and personal.
Yes. So did you make a conscious decision as you were becoming more and more successful that you were not going to lose your humanity, or is that your mama would have beat you? I mean, all
of that, really, because I was raised, honestly, a certain way. My mother always says, she still says it now, don't change who you are. Mm-hmm. No matter what comes along, do not change who you are, because you do that, changes your spirit, changes your heart, and all that then changes the things that happen to you. Don't change who you are. So I started that way in my upbringing, right? Mm-hmm. And I was fortunate enough to work or have examples of people on both sides, to be frank, but I also had examples of people who were kind and wonderful to work with or to meet and know, legendary people. And I thought to myself, I want to be like that. It wasn't in my spirit to be mean and be competitive. And, you suffer a little bit for it because, there are people cut your arm off to cut your right arm off to get your left one, But I was like, no, I think spirit is with me enough that I don't need to do that. I think I can afford to be kind because my heart needs to stay the way it is. No job, no career advancement, nothing is more important than me being able to look in the mirror you know, because we know people, God bless them, who are wildly successful and they can't stand themselves because of what they've done to get it.
Yeah.
And they go through all sorts of machinations to avoid themselves. Yeah. Now, let's just say, what hell could be worse than trying to avoid yourself? Oh. Who's closer to you than you? And if you don't like you, that's a problem for you. You know, that's a real problem daily, every day. So I wanted to like myself. And I can honestly say, other than a few slip occasions, warranted, but I have never had to be aggressive. I'll put it that way. Yeah. And I had to learn to stick up for myself a little bit more early on. Because I was a nice boy from the Midwest, Catholic boy, 14 years of Catholic school.
Catholic boy!
Seriously, like never had to do that kind of a thing. And, you come into the business, not to do anything to do with Catholicism, but you come into the business and you've been raised to be kind and considerate and all these things. And you get in a business that's wildly competitive. And if you don't have some sense of how to stay standing, you will get knocked down. So I had to learn that part of it. But I tried to do it as nicely and as definitively as I could, But I learned your word is your wand, walk softly, carry a big stick, all that stuff, Mm-hmm. And people learned fairly early on that I didn't say, I was like my dad, and that I didn't say a lot, but what I said I meant. And I was selective about what I said, and I didn't have to backtrack. And that's it. You know what I mean? If I say that's not happening, that's not a threat, that's a promise.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
I love it. So in your bio, you said, you told some tales in your bio. You said Ken Page is best known for the voice of Mr. Oogie Boogie in Tim Burton's cult classic, The Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah.
Awesome. You are absolutely known for that. Love it. But you're best known for almost everything you do.
When somebody asked me, they said, how do you come to the conclusion? But I said, look, this is the deal. And it's a blessing. It's not a negative. There are people from all these disparate, I always say that wrong, areas of my career, and they all kind of think of me differently from different things, And the trick for me, in a lot of ways, has been bringing them all under one banner. Because there are people, like The Nightmare Before Christmas, I say that because it's one of those cult things. It's worldwide, Yeah. However, there are people who know me from that who don't even know I was ever on Broadway, which is like, huh? But there's no reason. That's what they know. Now, I think more people know about Nightmare Before Christmas, but there was a time when, people didn't know I'd done that. They just knew I was in this show, that show, the next show, and on and on and on. Yeah. So it's really interesting. I just try to be equal in all areas, you know what I'm saying? But that's how I did not choose to say that, if you know what I mean. It was said to me. It was like, well, I think you're best known for, and I thought, really? Is that true? Yeah. And I thought, well, okay,
Nicely, guys and dolls. The Lion in The Wiz.
Yes.
Ken, the man has his name in a show that we still do all the time.
Yes.
And, so Ken in Ain't Misbehavin, Old Deuteronomy, Cat.
Grace of spirit, opportunity. I've always believed, something I was told early on, which was when opportunity meets preparation, you have success. Mm-hmm. And I've always tried to be prepared. I tell the young people now, if you're ready, you don't have to get ready. Oh, hello. And they always go, ooh. I said, no, I'm not trying to be, soothsayer, prophet. That's the truth. If you're ready, you don't have to get ready. Stay ready. Be ready. Then you are ready. So if they call your name, they call your number, they call you anything, you don't have to go, oh, let me go get ready. Well, by then, somebody who was ready has stepped up and you are late. You're late. I went to school for theater and all that, but I think I had that, I always tell people and they laugh and I tell them, because they're like, oh, how predictable. I said, but look, I used to sing in high school at the bus stop because I had to travel all the way across the city to go to school.
Mm-hmm.
College, same thing. I sang all the time. It was my mantra, and it still is, don't rain on my parade. And I would sing it at the bus stop. I mean, I didn't realize what I was doing. I chant now, and I do Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. But this was my early version of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo.
Yeah.
It was like, don't tell me not to do just it, but a nice candy and a Sunday bowl. I sang that on the train going to New York City for the first time. I wasn't kidding. It wasn't a song from a show or from Funny Girl. It was my mantra, and I meant it. Nobody is going to tell me don't, And if someone takes a spill, it's me and not you. Who told you you're allowed to rain on my parade, right?
Wow.
And those are really, really true. And I absolutely, lived by them. It was very showbiz of me, true enough, but it was real, And I remember going to auditions in New York when I first got there. And when I was sitting out in the hallway, people chat. No, I was sitting there thinking, don't tell me not to live, just say, nice kind of, don't tell me to. That was the way, if you say how I did it, and it didn't always work. I didn't always get the job, but I always felt like as long as you're in the game, the chance is there because you're ready. That's, and you're in the game. I remember when I auditioned for Guys and Dolls, I auditioned 7 times. For the, 7 times. So generally that means they're not sure they want. And then they hired someone else. And as fate would have it, which is often the case with me, it happens a lot. Whatever went on, and the gentleman was not doing it no more. And they called me and they said, because I was the understudy, I'd been hired to understudy.
Yeah.
And they called me, Laurie Wilson was our company manager. And she called me and she said, you're in. The familiarities, because she was our company manager, we did a tour of Pearly, like the last national company of Pearly. And she was our company manager. There were like about 8 of us who got into Guys and Dolls, including Norma Donaldson and Robbie Guillaume. And she called me up and she said, you're in. And I said, I know, I'm the understudy. She said, you're nicely. I was, you know. I was like, what? But I was like, okay. I'm ready. I knew the song. I always knew Guys and Dolls. It wasn't nothing for me to, And after 7 go-rounds, I was like, well, I was the understudy, so I was ready to do it. We hadn't started rehearsals or anything. But I remember calling my mother, just an interesting story. I always think it's funny. And I told her, Ma, I got the show. She said, oh, wonderful, baby. I said, yeah, I'm the understudy. She said, Now, you know what that means from a black mother. Like, I thought, what's wrong? That's not, she said, just wait a couple of days.
Oh, she's a praying mother.
See. Also, psychic.
Yeah.
And I said, I got an understudy in a Broadway show, and this is my first Broadway show. Pearly was on the road, and we did LA premiere, but that wasn't New York, And she said, just wait a couple of days. Sure enough, swear to God, 2 days later, they called and said, you got the part. And I called her. I said, Mom, she said, you got the part, didn't you? I said, I did. How did you know that? She said, I just knew it. I could feel it. She said, I knew it wasn't over yet. Something just said, it's not over yet. So that's, but it taught me, again, be ready. It didn't freak me out. It just, I thought, okay, you better be ready. And God bless.
The rehearsal process and everything, were you nervous?
Yes, we all were. Because, this was the sacred show of white musical theater. And we were being entrusted with it. And it was very, I think the word contentious would probably be accurate. Mostly because they were very, I think, afraid that we were going to take it and turn it into something. You know what I mean? From their perspective. So they sat and they had a man with the score who sat in rehearsals and watched every note. You could not change one note. And as it went on, it became like, well, this is ridiculous. We can't, we do some more. We need to have. So what they started doing or instituting was they started changing the arrangements. so that they would have a different feel. And, of course it led, I always think of Jimmy Randolph, who played Sky Masterson. And, Jimmy was like smooth and a crooner and from Vegas and everything. And then we started rehearsals and they would get, "I'll know when my love comes along." And Jimmy, one day he said, "I don't know how to sing this like that." He's a smooth, cigar smoker kind of guy. Sky Masterson, right? And they said, "Well, how were you, what were you?" And he just started with, he said, "I know when my love comes along." Well, it was the same notes, but the feeling was allowed to be part of it. And it kind of cracked the door open, and they were like, "Well, that's not so bad after all, let them breathe." Yeah. And therefore, Ernestine Jackson's rendition of "I Were Belle," the best ever. But it had to do with them letting the arrangement match our energy as African-American, Black at the time, performers. And with "Sit Down, You're Rockin' the Boat," the virtual number was not changed at all, note for note. And I was a classically trained singer, so I could sing it that way. But then, because everything else is kind of morphing a little bit, and they got to the point where they said, "Well, we got to have something," and this was, God rest him, Howard Roberts and Billy Wilson, the director and the musical director, and Danny Holgate, who was the arranger. They said, "We got to have something that gives us some signature on this." So they allowed them to change the last 8 bars of the song, which originally had been, "Sit down, you're rocking, sit down, you're rocking the boat, sit down, you're rocking, sit down." So it's cute, Yeah. And they said no. And Howard Roberts said, "And the devil will drag you under with his house so heavy you never blow. Sit down, 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 you're rocking the..." Well, all of a sudden it became our version of that song. And, I'll go on and on. But what happened was that was a teaser for the audience, because they were like, "Oh, well, now, come on, this is it now." And they were like, "Oh." So then, as time went on, the audience would applaud, because they wanted more of that, you see. And they thought, well, what can we do? Miracle of miracles, Joe Sullivan Lesser, Frank Lesser's widow, who was living at the time, gave permission to write an addendum to the number. They couldn't change the number anymore. So they wrote an encore that was it was based on a gospel song called "Stretch Out." I didn't know it, but Howard Roberts was saying, "Oh, stretch out, stretch out." And he says, "Okay, we're going to do this thing, and we're going to add it on at the end. If they applaud a lot, and they like, the last 8 bars, we'll go into this encore." So as the story goes, and make it a short story, we rehearsed it, and, it was da-da-da, drum fill would happen, da-da-da, why don't you, why don't you? And General Cartwright had a little line and stuff like, "Why don't you sit down? Go sit down. You better sit down. Y'all sit down." Well, that was like, now we're cooking, right? And it got to the point, I think somebody just told me, I didn't remember this, that the final performance, we did 5 encores. But every night we did at least 2. I'd finish, "Sit down, you're rocking the boat," and I'd sit down and they'd scream and applaud. And Joe Marshall, you may have known him at the time, he was a drummer. Wonderful. He played for Bubba Brown Sugar, he played Guys and Dolls, he was the drummer. And it was really he who decided, oddly enough, people think you must have really just wanted. I said, no, I would do 1 encore. Okay, I'm cool. And Joe would sit there and he'd look around, the audience would be screaming and stuff, and he'd look at me and he'd go, "Won't you?" And we'd go again, according to whatever they do. Joe decided, and Howard Roberts would always laugh because it was out of his hands. Joe just took it. And I would just stand there with the baton, and Joe would hit that fill, and we'd start again. It would get to the point, and I remember just getting to the point where I just go like, "I can't do it anymore. I can't do it again," which the audience loved. But I always think of that. It was such a great, way to come into Broadway, but it taught me lessons. Bring what you have to the party, whatever that means, wherever that applies. Bring what you have. I mean, like with Ain't Misbehavin, not skipping over the whiz, but with Ain't Misbehavin, it was all about bringing your best to the party because there was nothing else. There was nothing. It was just a stack of music and an idea about illustrating Fats Waller's energy, spirit, blah, blah, through the music that he wrote and performed. So you had, and they chose 5 people who were, quote unquote, supporting people. And you know how the structure of shows, those people work harder than anybody because they're bringing it up from the rear. Mm-hmm. When you put 5 people like that together, you've got a powerhouse of people, Each one of us was completely different, completely individual. And I always like to give, God bless, and I love my Charlene, but Irene Cara was the first lady in it off Broadway, the young lady. Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, but she was very Lena Horne, very, all that. Yeah. And she was the first. But at any rate, we had to just kind of inhabit, and it was an open door to do your creativity and be what you wanted to be. And the fun of it, I think for us, at least I could speak for myself, was we got to explore at a soul spirit level, the Harlem Renaissance, and those wonderful people and what they, because people think about it the way we were portrayed in the movies was often, other than like Stormy Weather and Oscar Michaud's films, we were always portrayed the way white society wanted us to be. Mm-hmm. When you see pictures in all of Harlem Renaissance, it wasn't like that at all. People were pulled up. They were dressed to the nines. They were doing a whole other thing. And for us, looking at that, our idea was, well, we want to be those people. That was the world Fats Waller really came out of. He was a gin drinker and all those other things, but he came out of that world. We think about Cab Calloway and Duke Ellington. They were white tie and tails. That's what they were serving. Bilbo Jangles Robinson. Done. That was kind of Andre's energy person, Yeah. And those people, and that's really what they were doing. So that's what we tried to bring to the show, was to remind people the elegance and the elan of these people. Because we've been seen doing a lot of other things, and that wasn't really, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Speaking of that company, you've lost 2 of your leading ladies. And what an incredible loss.
I mean, Nell Carter was a friend, and I adored and loved her. She was not easy, and I don't think anybody would argue with me on that. But that was Nell. She'd been around forever. Ain't Misbehavin was not the beginning of her career. And she was a very complicated woman, but she was also brilliantly talented. In her, that thing of, that's Nell. Nobody else like Nell. There was nobody else like Nell Carter, ever, and still not. Armelia was my heart. I mean, she was like my sister, my soulmate, my mentor in spirit. All those things rolled into one. She truly was, And I don't think, because I've been to LA since she passed, and I don't know how I'm going to react, because I've never been there that she wasn't there. Yeah. And whenever I'd go to work or do different things, the best part of being there after I moved away was, we would get together, and this wasn't like, let's go out to dinner and this was called, let's sit on the couch and eat a sandwich and talk about people. Have tea and talk about, and sometimes we just sit and watch TV, but that was how dear she was to me, and I could tell you 1,000 funny stories. But her loss is something my grandmother said about her cousin, who was like her sister. When she died, she said she took a lot more of me with her than she left here. And that's kind of how that feels, But you do raise them up. You know what I mean? That's what you got to do. You got to raise them up, and you have to say, well, you're not here, so now I got to live for you. I have to do the things I know you would do if you had the opportunity. Whenever and of course she was living up to, last October, but whenever I would direct Ain't Misbehavin, I've done 4 productions, and the last one I did at La Mirada was terrific. All of the people were always great, but this group was particularly terrific. And the young lady, we were auditioning people, and I thought, oh, nobody's coming in for the Amelia role, because it's a specific thing. Yeah. I always said, Nell won a Tony, Charlene was nominated, but it's that role, Amelia, that person, who does all the different characters. I mean, she goes from squeeze me, baby doll, plush, Batman, to baby, right, big mama. I mean, she played the gamut. Kate Smith, I mean, all of those imageries. And it's a hard role to cast because most women want to go toward the Nell energy and that more, thing and so forth. And the woman who's really, and there was an innate thing about her, she was truly, truly a lady. She didn't have it in her not to be, And she'd always say, why didn't I get that part? I said, because you're really not that person. I said, you're a great actress, but they want that other thing. I said, and that's not in you. I said, just like when you get that role and they don't, it's because what they're looking for, you have the quality. And, for film, it's more about all of that. And anyway, casting it, this wonderful, wonderful young lady, who, of course, my mind is skipping. I can't think of her name. It'll come to me. But she came in and she was an opera-trained singer. And she walked in and she was lovely. Just a breath of lilac air. You know what I mean? She really nails and not faking it, not put on for the audition. That's who she is, And I listened, I thought, oh God, I hope she's as good as she looks, And she started singing. And I stopped her because she was singing something. I said, that's great. I said, do you know Squeeze Me? And she said, yes, I believe I do. Very present. I said, sing it for me. I said, and you know what I'm looking for. We don't have to beat around the bush. Give me the baby doll. Give me the big, beautiful, gorgeous baby doll. And they ding, 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 ding. And she went, oh, Daddy, squeeze me. I said, that's it. That's it. That's what I'm looking for. And I told her about Armelia. I said, this is why. I said, when I do the show, I want you all to bring yourselves because that's what makes it work. But it's built on these personalities. So you first have to have that skeleton. Then you build the muscle, you build the this, you build that. But you got to have that stuff first because that's what makes the energy of the show work. Right. And one day we were in rehearsal and I called the queen. I called on the phone. I said, okay. And I almost said her name. I said, she's here and I want you to just say something to her so she makes an actual connection with you. And of course she got, hello, it was, oh yes, and you're going to be fabulous. You're going to do a brilliant job and you're going to be wonderful. She gave her all of this positive, and I'm sitting there watching the young lady and tears are rolling down her face. And she gave me the phone back. She said, I feel her. I said, that's the point. I said, because I want you to know what that is. Frenchie Davis was our Nell. Do I have to wear high heels? I said, yes, Frenchie. You do have to wear high heels. You love Frenchie. You got to love Frenchie. You know what I mean? I said, come on, Frenchie, let me have it now. She said, don't worry, Daddy, I'm going to give it to you. And then tore it to pieces. Yeah. And she said, well, how was that? I love her. Love her, love her. So anyway, before I digress so far, the idea of that show when you say my name is there and all that. And I always tell the people when we do it, because, I've come to play, they go, man one, man two, woman 1, 2, 3. I said, no. That is Andre, that is Ken, that is Amelia, Nell, and Charlene. I said, that's our legacy. I said, it's not an ego thing. They're not here. They don't, they're not here at this theater. I said, but I'm here and I'm entrusted with this. It's my duty to not only see that the integrity of the show remains intact as far as Black people doing this piece, but also that their legacy of what we created from ourselves. We were not directed, It was called Bring Your Thing. That has to keep living. And there was an incident recently, they were doing Smokey Joe's somewhere.
I heard about that.
I know everybody heard about it. And it was like, I communicated with Brenda and I said, Brenda, look, I'm just going to tell you where I stand. I said, now what you can do about it, I said, what you have to remember, someone has given them permission. Yeah, So whoever the rights belong to is the person who said you can chuck all that out the window and you can do whatever you want. I said, they're not doing it without somebody has to have given them permission. I said, so that's the phone call you need to make. The theater calling them is like, okay, but that's not who's really responsible. I said, if you want to represent for the legacy of Brenda and BJ and so on and so forth, I said, you have to talk to the authors.
Let me ask you though, having been an original cast member of some of our most iconic shows, Black shows, having been in all those rooms, how do you think the theater has changed from when you first started making Guys and Dolls into, a black show, or not a black show, but with black people?
Yeah, right.
And today, how do you think it's changed, or has it changed?
Oh God, yes. Thank God, yes. Yeah, and particularly since we've had the shutdown of COVID, it's changed tremendously. And it gives me great heart, I want to say, this what comes to me, to see the changes. Now, when I came through, none of that was happening. I mean, it was just called, we will let you know if we want to use you in what we're doing. Mm-hmm. The best part of that time was that there was a collective of so many shows running. There was The Wiz, there was Bubbly Brown Sugar, Guys and Dolls, me and Bessie, Trim and Nisha, Houston Grand Opera's Porgy and Bess. There were a lot of yards too short to box with God. And this is pre, the other shows that came along after. And there were like 8 Broadway shows, big shows that were running that were black shows. Because, people, especially ensemble people, they could go from show to show to show. People would give their notice of Bubbly Brown Sugar and come and do Guys and Dolls. Yeah. There was this wonderful friend of mine, thank God, who's still with us, Andy Torres, who just did any show he wanted to do. Because people were like, yes, Andy, please put Andy in the show. He'd go over and do this, and he'd do that, and he'd quit. And that could happen then because of it. So that was that, which went backwards. Mm-hmm. I would say probably in the late 80s into the 90s. I'm just throwing that out of the top of my head. All of a sudden, I looked at Broadway from LA, and all of a sudden it was 2 black people in the chorus. Maybe there was a principal character who was black, but it went back to this kind of gratuitous, and I thought, wait a minute, why are we back there? This is 19 blah, blah. Why are we back to 1 black boy, 1 black girl in the dancing ensemble? Why can't there be more? Why not? So what's, I think, happening now, because, which is falling out of fashion already, the word woke, these kids are like, no, we're not having that. We're just not having it. I don't mean this to be a downer, but it has to be maintained. I've seen it come and go. So it has to be maintained. But that seems to be happening because I think everybody who's concerned, younger people especially, were like, no, we're hip to this. We want to be on the board. We want to be on the committee. We want to be the writer, the producer. We want to be in those positions that make the choices.
Yes.
And we will then make choices to include everyone and to be inclusive, so to speak. We don't need to sit back and let you once again say, oh, okay, we're going to let you in. We're going to let more of you in. We're going to write a show so you have more to do. No. Let us decide that. And then you can partner us in our own reality. You don't have to, And that's a change that I think is happening. And it makes me tremendously happy because, again, like you were saying, for me, it's just the way I was raised. These young people, they don't think any other way. Mm-hmm. They didn't come through a time where they had to get over something in that sense. This is their reality. And they're like, well, if I can't be in the room where it's happening, I don't need to be on the stage where you're going to do it. You know what I mean? They're kind of like, that's where they're coming from, I
have one last question for you.
Yes. I can talk all day. You have to stop me.
So good. Oh, my goodness. Have all your dreams come true?
God, no. No. The minute I think you stop dreaming or wanting to dream or having dreams that are unrealized, it's over. There are a lot of dreams I wish had come true by now. Hello. But I always try to weigh that against how blessed I've been. Would I like to have a Tony Award? Absolutely. Do I have a Tony Award?
You don't have a Tony Award?
I've never been nominated for a Tony. And I say that now with, I used to kind of not talk about it. I've done several things, and I was doing anything with Alec Baldwin. He says, well, you were Tony nominated for this, and then he named 2 shows. I said, I hate to tell you this. I've never been nominated for a Tony. Wait, he just was gobsmacked. I said, no, I never was nominated for a Tony. I said, I used to not want to say anything about it because I felt like it was egotistical for me to say, I should have been that. But then I thought about it and weighed it against, I'll go back to Guys and Dolls. anyone I've known since then who's done anywhere near what I did in the show has been nominated. They just weren't, you know. And I think it had a lot to do with I was doing a sacred role from a very beloved community member, Stubby K. And I think it just had a lot to do with we're gonna leave that alone. Then came around this show and that show and the next show, and I thought, so the y'all just are having me. Is that what it is? I mean, what do I have to do? And then because it didn't happen, I just finally said, well, you know what? That's never been your raison d'etre. You've never really went in there to win awards. You went in there to do the work. It would have been nice to have at least the nominations, but I thought you've done just fine without them. There are people who won Tonys and people don't remember at all. You know, and nothing against them, but they don't, you know, and they won a Tony. I'm around, I've never been nominated, and I'm still trucking along at my speed, you know, and it's kind of, but it's consoled me some, you know, but it was painful. It was painful to go through all those shows and have those roles and have them do what they did and still never be in, because I love the theater. So for me, it wasn't like, give me that. It was like, I want to be recognized by my peers, you know. Yeah. When I was doing Cats, I always tell this to young people too. And the night before, everybody was, of course, nervous about who's going to get nominated, who's going to get nominated. People were really, because it could have been a lot of people, you know. And I thought, okay, you're the senior sort of member here. You know, you've been through this. And I got on the PA system. I said, okay, I know everybody's ready to slit their throats because they're worried about whether they're going to get a Tony nomination. I said, let me just say something to you, having been through it. You will come in tomorrow night, half hour, 7:30, and you will do the same show you did tonight, whether or not you're nominated for a Tony. I said, and if you are nominated, you're going to have to prove it to the audience because they're like, okay, you're nominated for Tony, let's see it. I said, if you're not nominated, you're going to have to prove it to yourself. And I said, somebody said something to me years ago. I said, and I will end with this. I said some more stuff. I said, remember, wherever you go, there you are. And I heard people laughing all over the thing. It was like, first, what does that mean? You know, but I wanted them to think about it. You are in the moment you're in. Doesn't matter all that other stuff. Because, you know, 6 months afterwards, it's just a job. You got to show up and do the show. Ain't nobody talking about your Tony or your lack of a Tony. It's the show, right? And the morning of the nominations, I wasn't nominated on it. And I thought to myself, okay, so in the interim afterwards, some people were surprised, to be honest, you know. So Patti LuPone, the great diva, came to the theater. We were friends and we worked. She came to the theater and they announced her downstairs, you know, Ken Page, Patti LuPone is here to see you. Doors flew open all over the theater like, Patti LuPone is here. She came up the steps calling me. And I know she did it all to, you know, give me, Ken, where are you, darling? Where are you, Ken? Oh my God, these steps are so high. Where are you? Blah, 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 all the way up to my dressing room. She walked in the dressing room, and I've said this, it's in my show, page by page. She walked in the dressing room, and she looked at me. She said, I just have something to say to you. The Tony, the base of the Tony, is made out of plastic. Okay? She said, let's go to Saudi's and have lunch. It doesn't mean it isn't nice to have it. It is nice to get it. And anybody who has one is glad, 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 as I would have been. But it did say to me, don't be defeated, because I think that might have been the plan. You know what I'm saying? You know, I was like, you don't know. That is fuel to the fire for me. All that says to me is I'm going to keep on getting up because you're trying to put stumbling blocks in my way, one way or the other. Energy, spirit, opportunity. I am not. Don't rain on my parade. And my parade is march to my music, not your music, you know?
Yes. I know you were happy for your Ain't Misbehavin castmate who finally got his.
Yes, absolutely. Well, you know, people say, well, I said, he's earned it. Yeah. My God, you know, and think of the things he did. You know, he should have been nominated for The Wiz. You know what I mean? It wasn't, come on, right? And twice or three times nominated before he really won. And when I saw him in the show, he came out on stage. And I'll tell you, I was in tears. I couldn't stop because I knew not only, because he's consummate, he's not just, he's consummate. That's Andre, And when he walked out on the stage, I knew he was bringing everything he'd ever done on that stage with him. Knowing him like I do, my brother, I knew it. I could tell all the strength that he's gained in those 70 odd years, all the roles that he's done, and his artistry, because he's certainly singular, it all came together in that role at that time. And I'm so glad that they recognized him, because it was the penultimate version of what he does. Not saying he won't do more and has done more. He just did King Lear here in St. Louis. But that somehow to me was like I said, I couldn't stop. I just felt him. I felt his energy.
Yeah.
And I get choked up now. When I went backstage, we couldn't say anything. We just hugged each other, and people just sort of started moving away, because there was clearly something going on that was beyond, And that was it. It was like, I felt it. I know, And all he would say was, Ken Page. I said, I feel you.
That Tony, I am a bit like your mom. So I will tell you, it is coming.
Well, that's nice to hear, but I'm going to tell you something. I don't mean this in any egotistical way. You know that, and I hope your audience will know it. Something says to me, you have just reached, like Andre, maybe, you have just reached the point. There's a role that's coming towards you that you've been coming towards all your career. And it's not going to be a role somebody else could do, or it might be it's going to be yours. And the things that you are is what's going to bring it to life. And something inside of me just keeps saying it, and I don't try to feed it. I don't necessarily, support it in my thinking, if you will. It's just something keeps saying to me, it's not over, not yet. Even if it's one more, there's something coming where you get to walk out on that stage and do exactly what you do that's yours, all your own. And it will have taken this long to get to the point where it's perfected, where you can just breathe, So I thank you for saying that. And every day I don't believe it, but somewhere in there, something just always says, no, it's coming.
Elevate, motivate, create new things. It's relevant, you're a blessing, cause your gift and it's truly heaven sent. Giving people hope for the future, pushing something new for the culture, doing exactly what you're supposed to. Give them all something to hold on to. You hear it, you feel it, they need it. You write it, you sing it, it's healing. You're different and here for a reason.
I love you, and you take very good care of you and yours.
I will.
Yeah. It's all on its way. We ain't done yet.
It's heart and spirit.